Welcome to the Teens Armory podcast. We have the goal to help young Christians today to grow in their faith. This episode will talk about cancel culture. I'm Chris and I'm here with Hayden. How's it going, Hayden?
It's going good, it's going good. Happy spring break. By the time of recording this, we are out of school, which is pretty
Happy
nice.
spring break.
Um, yeah. What have you been doing over spring break so far?
Not really much. We've had people over a couple times. Get to see some old friends. It was really nice to see some old friends who I haven't seen in a really long time from actually a different church. So that was pretty fun.
Mm,
Get to talk to them. I think we have some more plans coming up in the future, possibly other plans that are coming up. So that's something to look forward to.
yeah. Yeah, it's really good, really good. I went to Oklahoma for a bit,
Let's
did
go
some stuff there, and that's pretty
all the
much
way to
my spring
Oklahoma.
break so far. I know, all the way to
That's
Oklahoma. This is a big
that's
drive.
crazy. Congrats.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I mean, spring break's gonna be pretty relaxed. Catch up on homework, do some stuff for TTA and whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, Chris, let's go ahead and if you don't have anything else to add, let's get our episode
All right,
started.
sure. Let's get into the episode.
Yeah, I have a question, Chris. What is cancel
Well, you
culture?
see, cancel culture is when there's demon worship on TV and everyone's fine. Nobody panics because it's all part of the plan. But the moment you switch the channel to Donald Trump and it's white supremacy and everybody loses their minds, that's cancel culture. No, in all seriousness, though, cancel culture is a noun and it means a way of behaving in a society or group, especially on social media, in which it is common to reject and to stop supporting someone because they have said or done something that offends you. Some people think it's
Mm,
good, some people think it's bad. Let me just tell you, we are not the first people.
yeah, yeah. I'll go ahead and get started. I have a 3 point. I think we both have a 3 point structure. My 3 point structure is typically my normal one. What is this thing? What is it doing to Christians in particular, and how should we respond to it? That's my normal structure for most of these episodes, and I'll keep that structure for this episode. So, my first point is cancel culture is control through ruining one's reputation. If you're on social media, even just a little bit, then you'll know about canceling people. Heck, I really only use YouTube to just enjoy some animations and gaming videos, and yet I still see cancel videos, even in my little window. These typically happen when a content creator says something that offends someone greatly. Now, I'm mainly looking at this from the YouTube standpoint, but I also know it could be the same on Twitter or on other sites, but I've just never really used those sites or know a lot about those sites to really talk about them. So I'm just going to talk about it from my own personal experience here. Now, the most common one, especially in today's days, first of all, is not supporting a creator or not supporting the LGBTQ community. This one is just so common. Everywhere I go, I'll see creators try to weave around this whole or, try to not do this or not say that. This is just a very common one. But it's not one of the only ones. I feel like the radically progressive side is very common. And if you don't agree with the progressive beliefs, then you will end up canceled. I couldn't think of words. Anyway, this not supporting the LGBT community is very present in media now, especially with the rise of it. That being said, whether it's by religion or disagreements with the core idea of the community, when the cancellation happens, the creator will try to justify themselves. Um, Now probably both a video being like, "I'm sorry," or explaining your beliefs, but nobody cares. Like you have no idea how much I've seen people make these apology videos, but no one cares because no one cares. You know. In fact, people will go into that video and just mock the creator for trying to become uncanceled. Like, oh, this is just a pitiful attempt for becoming uncanceled. Then the creator's career on whatever social platform is now void. They're just known for being homophobic or whatever. Now, I rarely watch cancel videos or are boycotting certain creators because I believe we should hear people out. In today's age, people, especially young people, it is so present in today's generation, refuse to listen to anyone. Now, this
Mhm.
is just a very important topic, first of all. They will say one thing against someone, they'll rally others with them, be like, yeah, They'll say this thing about one person when they should instead, and then when they should listen to other people, they don't. They don't. They just say one thing and don't listen to the objection.
Hmm.
Now, the topic of listening is is a very first of all, very important topic we'll definitely cover later. But it's also a very sad thing to do. Like, think about it. One individual with a lot of status, right? They have a lot of status, and they'll use this status to control a situation. That's what they're doing. They're controlling. They're getting rid of a possible, a person they don't like or disagree with. Instead of a one-on-one, like, hey, can we talk about this? They're going, no, I'm gonna share this with everyone that knows me because I have so and so amount of followers, and they're all gonna hate you because they trust me.
Hmm.
And this control is just so saddening, honestly. Like, here, I'll give a little analogy. Imagine you're a toy maker, okay? Who seeks to make the best toys you can for your customer. And one day a man comes in and looks at one of your toys and decides, he wants to buy it. He wants to buy this toy. Um, he buys it and he says he says to the shop owner, the way he greets his customers offends him. And he preferred if he stayed silent instead of greeting the customers. And the shopkeeper listens to him. Um, and then he, decides to answer and tells why he greets his customers. He says it's a good way to brighten up the day for them. What if they're having a bad day and it's this and this and this? But the other man, the buyer, does not listen. He just leaves. Just leaves there. Now, the next few days, you, the shopkeeper, receive very little customers until you receive none. And then you realize you've been boycotted. And when you try to explain things to people outside, like, oh, this man is wrongly accusing me, he's just saying this because he just is offended by the way I greet my customers. I already told him this and that and that. All he gets is mockery. All you get is mockery. This is the true sadness. Sometimes social media is somebody's job. I think it's definitely over the pandemic. It was a big thing for someone to be a YouTuber. Everyone was getting into content creation, and now even past the pandemic, people have to keep up that career. It's also someone's personal outlook where they share ideas and creations, drawings, all this other stuff. But either way, they can no longer do that because they're canceled, right? Now, now they're being known for being homophobic, narcissistic, or just plain old rude. Uh, Now, there are certain circumstances in which a person being canceled is wrong, not just for being offensive, but for doing something illegal or something just everyone agrees is morally wrong. Those are the times when, well, even then, cancellation is wrong. You should really take it up with an actual court instead of sharing it with people. But rant aside, cancelers use their status to get rid of creators they disagree with or feel offend them.
Yeah.
Christopher, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, you really touched on a lot of cool stuff. As usual, you always find a way to bring it like really close to actual personal application. So that's really good. But yeah, this is something we see
Hmm.
a lot. It's straw manning. That's what it is. The straw man fallacy is a logical fallacy that's inconsistent. It's where you take someone's idea, your basic idea, and then you start attacking a certain version of that idea that they didn't necessarily say. So, for example, that
Hmm.
shopkeeper that Hayden mentioned, he could have just been greeting them someone normally, and then the man who walked out, he could have gone out and he said, "This I got harassed by the manager." And now, see, that's a straw
Hmm.
man because he took the original idea of talking to the person, he twisted it in a way. So now he's erected this podium to yell at for everyone to fight at, and they're fighting at their
Yeah.
own version of the person. And both sides have this podium too. It's not just the people on the left and the people on the right are okay. Both sides are
Hmm.
making this podium, and they're yelling at the podium rather than actually attacking the true arguments that come from the original claim of the argument, which is why no one's getting really anywhere on this except for the left because they know how to excel at this and they know how to succeed at this. Whereas most people would just do the same thing and it's not working for them. So yeah, you did really
Hmm.
good on that. So cancel culture at its core It's a form of bullying. It just essentially destroys reputation. Its role can be portrayed as Batman, a vigilante who enacts social justice, when in reality, it's more like a bazooka, aimable, devastating, and causing more damage than anything. And sure, you may
Mm,
say, well, there is a few cases when this can actually be useful, because in theory, cancel culture sounds like it might be a good thing. Someone does something wrong, someone gets away with something they shouldn't have, they should be canceled, right? Well, in practice, it's actually quite different. In practice, this comes from the assumptions that come with the Marxist oppressor oppressed category. See, the Marxist oppressor oppressed idea says that marginalized groups such as Black people, LGBTQ people, and etc., these people are the oppressed groups. And then the reason they say this is it's not because there's no laws against Black people or there's no laws against these people. It's that they want laws protecting and giving more rights to these marginalized groups. And now, why would they do this? I mean, why would they want more rights and more laws protecting these people? It's because man wants power. That's all it is. There's nothing new under the sun. Man wants to be God and he wants to elevate himself to the status of God. That's been happening.
mm,
We've seen that for thousands of years. We've seen it at the Tower of Babel. It's nothing new. Man just
mm,
wants power, and he will try to get power. And now, of course, one may say, well, this whole thing, it's just going to collapse any day now because it's built on sand. I mean, and yes, I agree that it is built on sand, which means that, sure, enough gusts of wind should be able to knock this house down. But of course, if you can cancel any gust of wind and get yourself into a controlled environment with no wind, then there's nothing to blow down the house that's built on sand. And how do you stop those gusts of wind? You cancel them. That's what's going on. The radical left desires conformity to their ideas. So they're going to do their best to take whatever idea you may have and conform it and compress it into their strict view of however far you're allowed to think. They use
mm,
the labels such as tolerance and acceptance in order to bypass and to get the public opinion in their interest. For example, we can't have conservatives because they're not accepting enough. We can't have strict Christians because they don't understand. They're ignoring the lived experiences that people have gone through. This is what we saw with the He Gets Us campaign. That
yeah,
it was an attempt. It was used by the left in many ways. You can see the clear ignoring of the gospel and the focusing on more of a social thing. It was more of a social impact rather than a gospel impact. So the only thing that they tolerate is their views, and they claim that they're more tolerable or they're more acceptable than other groups. But let me tell you this: that logically, it just doesn't work. A completely
mm,
tolerant society cannot logically exist. Do you know why? It's because attempting to be completely tolerant would require the tolerance of groups who promote intolerance of one another. So it logically contradicts itself. For example, Christianity in Rome. The Romans didn't persecute the Christians because they worshiped Jesus. They persecuted him. They persecuted the Christians because they worshiped only Jesus.
mm,
We might be seeing a lot of this today. Sure, you can worship your God, but you also have to worship the God of the woke. This is a
mm,
repeat of it. And of course, it's not nearly as strict though, because we have protections in this country that can stop us from being actually burned at the stake or being thrown into beasts. But still, there is a pressure being put on us, and there is a pressure that we need to be aware of. And I will mention more on this pressure later. However, I would like to note that this is something that we need to be aware of because if we just ignore it, then it can only grow. So that's what I have to say on this. I'll talk a little bit more about the pressure part a little bit later. I think it's important that we dive into how it affects us as Christians. I think Hayden has a little bit more on that.
Yes, my next point is on how does it affect Christians? So what we have to understand, and I'm definitely going to mention this later because I'm off notes right now, but um, is that Christians are the most going to be the most persecuted groups. No matter what anyone else says, Christians will always be the most persecuted groups because we believe that we are not going to be of the world, which is so many other people are of the world, and a lot of people disagree with the fact. They said, "Oh no, we should be, of the world. The world, we should, you know, we should worship idols, right? We should worship
Hmm.
gold. We should make more money, right? All this and this and this, all this material stuff when we Christians focus on heaven. So I'm just gonna put that point out there for all of us to think about. Now, cancel culture, most of the time, targets big names. People, have a lot of big names that people have a lot of recognition, but they also target certain groups of people. Now, due to Christians' particular beliefs on certain topics, such as LGBTQ, honestly, progressively radical in general, most Christians disagree with that. By most, I mean there are progressively radical, quote unquote, Christians. Um, Now, because of that, cancel culture seeks to peer pressure and boycott a Christian until they become a progressive Christian. Another thing they might do is threats, but this cancel culture works a bit different than other things. But I have heard of, or not heard of, yes, I have heard of witnesses or missionaries who have been threatened to change their beliefs in the gospel. And that is a very scary thing that we can honestly touch on in a whole nother episode. But yeah, let's keep going. Um, this is what they seek: a world of equality, a world where those kinds of Christians, a world without those kind of Christians that believe all the Bible says. The Christians that believe against the progressively radical. These cancelers will use their status to find the weakest in the herd, the young. Like a wolf, they will use their numbers to rush the youngest in the pack. Sure,
Mm.
they will face opposition from the biggest in the herd, but their numbers are too great, and they will catch up. They will catch the youngest in their jaws. It's like what Chris said. They think of themselves as heroes, making the world an equal place, when in reality, they're like a predator that hunts down its prey and uses its numbers to take down the weak and then the strong. The cancel culture is constantly after Christians because of their disagreement to progressive ideas. So just I'm gonna add a little bit more on that. The progressively radical, like we have talked about this a lot, with the Hitler Youth and stuff like that, have used these strategies of propaganda to youngsters, or young people to
Hmm.
change them. And that is another reason why we exist to talk or speak with, young people, to educate young people, is because of how this generation and all the young generations are threatened by these ideas. Like these ideas are very present even in a secular school system or just people walking up to your door. Like these ideas are everywhere. And if we are not educated enough to um, debate these ideas, to stand firm in our faith, if we are not strong enough in the gospel, then we will fall and join these cancelers who only seek to make the world in their own image, who only seek to control, they seek power, like Chris said earlier. And this brings up the idea, what can a Christian do? You know? Um, Now this is like a cliffhanger to an episode. I'll tackle that in my next next note section. That's on to you, Chris. If you have anything to add.
Well, I'm not sure how to continue after a cliffhanger, so I guess I'll just go right into my next point. But still, good stuff. If someone is canceled, a canceled person is rarely heard out. That's something that we should notice.
Hmm.
That's something I don't like about cancel culture. They don't even know what they're mad at. I mean, have you ever really seen the effects that happen when someone is angry at something without fully knowing why? The truth is that this anger that comes from someone who, if someone, let's say this, someone is canceled, they They might have said something controversial, like let's say they don't support a certain community, then they would probably get canceled immediately. And then everyone who already didn't support them, everyone who was on a neutral ground is probably going to move away from them. And the only people who are probably going to stay close are those who stuck with them and are extremely loyal. And other than that, everyone, the modern average public opinion view is going to be, well, we don't want to hear that person. We already know that they've been canceled and it must be for a good reason. So we're not even going to hear them out. We're not going to hear if they have any reason why, if any of this, any of this happens, they're just gone.
Hmm.
Um, Now I want you to imagine a constrictor. Imagine this constrictor, the snake that wraps around its prey, and it does this very slowly until it engulfs its prey around it. So that way it gets so tight that the animal inside of the that's being constricted dies, so that way it can be eaten. Now the left's tactic of cancel culture is sort of like this, and it will only grow more efficient as it gets tighter. Now, the reason and the way they do this, it starts off with something less controversial. Racism is bad. I agree, racism is bad. We need to stop racism because it's an ongoing sin that's in the world, but it's not an exclusive American thing. That's what I
Hmm.
would say. Whereas the left would say, yes, racism is bad. Then they get a little bit more controversial. Everyone's on their side in saying racism is bad, almost virtually everyone. Then they move in a little closer and they say, well, racism is bad and there was racism in the past. So we need to people who have been impacted by racism, we need to give them special rights in order to help them with all that's going on. Because in the past we were wrong to them. So now we need to give them special privileges and stuff, which really can be undermining too, with the whole DEI and stuff,
Hmm.
diversity, equity, inclusion. But that's a whole nother episode for another time. So they move closer and closer in, constricting your options and where you can go. One thing that can result from this is that Christianity that's accepted is only going to be their version. Again, remembering back to Rome, their version of Christianity would only be accepted if they bowed down to Caesar and they bowed down to all the gods of Rome. They would have been fine. They would have been free to worship their God as long as they also worship the God that they were being forced to. However, they rebelled against this, and because of that, the Christians in Rome were persecuted for being rebellious. So, in the same way, the only Christianity that will be accepted is their version. They'll say, oh, no, no, we still love Jesus. We just don't like that Jesus. I would like to just point out a verse that can help us against this, maybe. We should learn from Ephesians 4:14 that we should no longer be as children. Ephesians 4:14 says this. As a result, we are no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves, carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, by the craftiness and deceitful scheming. You see, this is an attempt. The children, as Hayden mentioned, who are being targeted, are also going to be affected because they're going to be more likely to be tossed here and there by every wind of doctrine.
Hmm.
And this wind of doctrine, it's going to be affecting later down in the line. We talked on this before. We talked about how the youth are going to be affected by this. So instead, we need to be wise. We need to be discerning, because when I hear someone say, "Well, you see, we have this more loving, we have this more accepting, this more caring version of Jesus," do you want us? Do you want to believe in this Jesus, or do you want to believe in that mean old Jesus who teaches hate? Naturally, it's going to seem easier to say, "Why do you want to believe in the loving Jesus who only teach love?" But we need to stand firm against this, in spite of its attempt to grow in the growth of progressive Christianity. We need to stand against it by being aware of it and by being wise against it. And now you might wonder, why do they even use this tactic of the constricting and trying, attempting at least, maybe not effectively, but they're at least attempting to constrict our view and to constrict the things a Christian can say. It's a manipulation of the government, really. You see, the First Amendment gives us freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Therefore, any direct attacks to Christianity would be protected. However, if you can find a way to work around and twist it so that way it would say, well, you see, that's not freedom of speech because when the Christian talks, he's speaking hate speech. So this would be an exception to the First Amendment. Um,
Mm,
he can get away. He can't get away with that because what he said offends me personally, and I don't think hate speech should be allowed. So because I don't think hate speech should be allowed, we should limit what this person can legally say. You see that? Do you see the bounds that are going to be put on? It's
mm,
very slow because the founders of the country in America were wise enough to have this First Amendment to protect us. However, there is still a way to put limits and to put a little bit of pressure on Christianity. And that's what we need to be aware of.
hmm
We need to find our way out of this. And of course, I think Hayden's about to tell us how we can do what we can do against this cancel culture that's growing. Even if this cancel culture that's here in today's age, and what we can do against it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I don't think mine necessarily pertains to the government aspect, but you could definitely take some things away for that. So, yeah, great stuff, Chris.
Thank you.
So my final point is, what can Christians do against cancel culture? There are probably many verses in the Bible that involve Christians being quote unquote canceled, right? There are plenty of examples in the New Testament, such as Jesus, Stephen, and the apostles. But the main one I want to talk about today is Paul. Now, Paul was probably one of the second most canceled people in the Bible, next to Jesus, of course. Now, when I say canceled, don't think of the modern terms on social media, but think about in-person interactions in which Paul is being trialed in prison, or in the case of Second Corinthians, replaced. Paul had a rocky relationship with the Corinthians. I can go ahead and explain it. In the beginning, Paul went there. He preached. There were little fruit, and then he heard news that they had grown in the faith, and then he went back. Um, Actually, no, and then he sent his first letter to the Corinthians, I believe. I don't know. Actually, I probably should. I'm a little bit rocky in the Corinthians history, but there is one part where Paul leaves the Corinthians, and they are joined by people called the super apostles, which are basically like modern day look really good preachers. Um, they look really good. They preach with big words, and everyone feels the power in their message. Like, whoa, these guys are super. They're cool and stuff like that. But they didn't care about their message, but rather their appearance. Now, this is a long stretch for being canceled, but hear me out. Paul was astonished and very, very sad. It was said that he was in a whole other country preaching, and he couldn't stop thinking about the Corinthians. So this caused him to write the tearful letter, which some believe is a part of Second Corinthians. I personally don't know. I'm not really a big Bible history guy. I probably should get more into that if I'm gonna talk about it here. But the letter was so moving that the Corinthians turned back to Paul. Now, in this verse, Paul represents the Christian in terms of our cancel culture thing. This is my little analogy within an analogy or whatever. The super apostles are the cancelers, of course, and the people being controlled are the Corinthians. In this, we are both Paul and the Corinthians. We are the Christian being boycotted for our beliefs, and the Corinthian who is controlled by the cancelers to be against Paul. We as Christians should always be firm in our faith. We should not bend under the pressure and become progressively radical. Instead, what we should do, as Paul does, and what we should do as Paul does, and explain our beliefs and issues. Sure, some may not listen, but that leads to my second point. What's it called? No, the Corinthians, who when they followed others hurt. What am I saying? Okay, I know. The Corinthians, who when they followed the super apostles, heard Paul out and realized their offenses against him. This is a beautiful example of people in the Bible listening. The Corinthians didn't have to read Paul's letter. They didn't have to listen to someone read his letter, but they chose to. They chose to because they were intrigued and also they wanted to hear him out. They wanted to hear what he had to say on the super apostles. And Paul, he talks about that. Even in Second Corinthians, I believe, he talks about his strength and his weakness. He talks about
Hmm.
why he's better than these super apostles. Now, my final points are that you, as a Christian, when being faced with cancel culture, stand firm in your faith. Remember that we as Christians will experience persecution. Remember that we are strong. We must be strong. We must stay in Jesus, and we must not lean to the left or to the right. We must stay on the path. Um, we must listen to others. Do not base your belief on one person's opinion, but hear both sides out. This reminds me of a statement in a book I read a long time ago called To Kill a Mockingbird. In that book, there's a character
Hmm.
called Atticus Finch. If you have read the book, you know that Atticus Finch is a wonderful guy and father. He's the lawyer for the man being persecuted through the book, the quote unquote Mockingbird. Um, now, the Atticus is a man who believes that both people should be heard out. And he had a saying to, I think it was to Scout, he said, or Scout was his daughter. He had a saying, I think it went along the lines of, the best way to know a man is to get in his shoes and walk around a little bit. I think I butchered that line a good bout. Probably should have done some research on that line, but it makes a good point. We should, listen to other people's and what they have to say, and then we should from then on discern both with our knowledge of Christ and the Bible and what the Bible says, but also our knowledge on what is the truth in this topic.
Hmm. Um,
You want to ask something?
yeah, you better be careful. You might get canceled for butchering the quote.
Yeah, I probably will. I'm very sorry. I love To Kill a Mockingbird, by the way, y'all. Um, and finally, turn away from this culture if you are in it. This culture will only form you into a toxic person who makes accusations and does not listen to explanations. Right? This is a very dangerous thing, especially when you're receiving advice from an older and wiser person. You could be like, "So what? I don't need to know that. I don't care about that. I don't have to listen to that." When really, we all should be good listeners. We all should listen, even if what they're saying is wrong. We should still listen, hear them out, and then from there on, make our points, right?
Hmm.
We can't just say, "Oh, you believe in or oh, you believe in like I don't know another religion. Oh, I'm not gonna listen to you, right? Because what you believe in is wrong." No, we'll listen to them out. We'll go, "Okay, I see where you're coming from, but here's where you're wrong, and here's what I believe." That's one way to do it. It's not the best way, but it is one way. Anyway, that's all I have to say on this topic. You anything to add, Chris, or do you want to keep going?
Yeah, just one last point that I have is that this cancel culture will end. You know, tides change, culture changes, God's steadfast love endures forever.
Hmm.
Cancel culture will end, whether it be from it growing even more, the radically progressive left might even make even more moves. It might evolve from cancel culture. Well, no, I said evolve. But anyway, it might grow even more, or it might not. It might end. I don't know. I just know that it will not last forever. This is not the end of Christianity, and it's far from it. It's just a tool used to attack us. The enemy will try to stop us, but when trials and tribulations come, even minor ones, we need to preach the word and still spread the gospel. It's then when we make the most impact against the enemy. It's there where we stop playing defense against the enemy's attack and we switch to offense. The gospel is a powerful thing. The enemy will prevent it from being shared, or he will try. So stay aware, stay on guard, and keep preaching the gospel. That's all I have. Anyway, Hayden, you can close us out.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and close this out. Thank you for listening this far. You must be a pretty good listener. Ha ha ha. Managed to do that really well. I'm sorry. Anyway, uh, thank you for listening this far. Be sure to share the show with people who are in this kind of culture or people who are struggling with no knowing about this or needing understanding. Be sure to support the show. This is no longer free. And we'd always love it if you could support, once again, as we always say, local church comes first. Then it's not actually a saying, but yeah, we could coin it eventually. Um, if you want to know more on theology or just we have some older people in this podcast, listen to Solacast. It's really good. A lot of goes into more depth than we do, and
Mm,
they probably have an episode on cancel culture, or definitely an episode on the radical left. If you want to
yeah,
know more about if you want to know more about evangelism, Hearts for the Lost, great podcast.
great ministry.
Oh yeah, great ministry too. They definitely have an episode on listening. Um, to summarize the show, I would say stand firm in your faith, be a good listener, and do not be affected or in this kind of culture. Always be discerning with your beliefs and a good judge. Yeah. All right, let's do the thing now. Shield of faith. Shields
Shields
up.
up.
Hopefully we don't get canceled by this episode. Yeah.